Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with the One Nation Under Whisky podcast. I'm joined today, and as always, by my good friend, my business partner, the dear, sweet, endearing Jason Johnston Yellen. How are you today?
Thank you.
On this fine whatever day we're on?
I'm Tickety-Boo. All
right. Do you, just really quickly, is there an origin story to Tickety-Boo?
Nope.
All right. Well, I asked you about Nay Scoob. You told me about Nay Scoob, right? You don't have a Scooby-Doo clue, so you don't have an idea. I asked you about Never in My Cream Puff, which...
Cream Puff? Yeah, don't know that one.
Yeah, but you had a reason to use it.
Sure. As much as I've got a reason to use anything.
So Tickety-Boo, just like Cream Puff, doesn't really have an origin story that you're familiar with.
Tickety-Boo? Nope, I do not. I like the sound of it. It resonates quite nicely. Tickety-Boo. 2 words.
Tickety-Boo. Oh, it's not a hyphenated, like tickety-boo?
I don't know. You'd have to speak to... I don't know. I don't know. Mr. Tickety and Ms. Boo. I don't know if they hyphenated or not.
Is that like Captain and
I can only speak for Johnstons and Yellens. Decisions that were made there many decades ago that, holy moly, it still just boggles our mind that here we are in 2022, some computer systems still don't use a hyphen.
Is that true?
Yeah, so when traveling, say I go into the United Club Lounge,
yeah,
my information, Johnston and Yellen just run together.
Yep.
And so whoever's at the desk just says, "Welcome. It's good to see you again." Meanwhile, in front of me, they've said, "Welcome, Mr. Smith." And behind me, they've said, "Welcome, Ms. Jones." And then me in the middle, they're like, "It's good to see you again."
Hey, you.
It's yourself.
Yeah, that's right. That happens with Haida too, right? Because she's a hyphenated last name as well. So she'll quite often be a Mueller Hatton, no hyphen, or a Mueller space Hatton. Like it completely just wants to get rid of the hyphen.
I would accept the space over the combined. Sometimes what will also happen is the N will get dropped from the end of Yellen because there's too many letters. Some systems, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but some systems only hold like 15 letters of a last name.
Yeah.
And the hyphen and the N, I think, pushes us to 16.
Oh, so you just become very yelly.
Yeah, that's it.
I think they're just saying things about you. He's real yelly, this guy.
Oh, what's your name? Johnston Yellen. That's not what it says here. That's because in 2022, not all computer systems work. It's not a me thing. It's a that system thing. So could we buck up our ideas here? Here's a question.
All right, go ahead.
Have you been watching? And I've got a
gosh.
feeling you have not.
I was about to ask you if you were watching something, and now you're going to ask me if I was. Oh, God, I want it to be the same thing.
I hope it is. I don't think the statistics are in our favor of you and I naming the same thing.
I have not been rewatching Golden Girls. I appreciate you asking me that. But
do you know what's so funny about you saying that? Is Tamara and I have been rewatching Will and Grace.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just to see how it's aged, just to see,
Has it aged well?
I don't know. I don't know if it has. It's an easy watch, and I really feel that we're back in 98, 99, 2000. That was the first 3 seasons. And whereas I'm noticing a lot of the younger people, hey there, fellow kids, have been watching Friends. They've been going back. And traveling around airports, I'm seeing young people in baggy Friends sweaters. It's an interesting development.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the young people have been doing Friends. Tamara and I kind of dipped into Will and Grace. Anyway, that was only from you talking about Golden Girls, which I adore. Have you been watching the video game, the history of video games documentary on Netflix? The 6 episodes?
So we aren't talking about the same thing. I wanted to ask you about Sandman. No,
Oh, right.
right? Because that's something that I figured that you would have read. But anyway, we'll
I
get,
did read back in the day. I did.
we'll get to that.
I haven't
in a
watched
second.
it.
You haven't watched it? Oh, Jason, it's excellent. It's really excellent. I'm just 6 episodes in. It's remarkable. It's really good. Anyway,
All right. Who has it?
Netflix. Yep,
Okay.
really good adaptation. Yep, I think you'll be happy with
Okay.
it. Even my most, you know how Star Wars fans, like nowadays, it seems most Star Wars fans are toxic Star Wars fans. Like,
That's what I'm hearing.
it has to be perfect. Everything has to align with canon. We are not allowed to have any fun whatsoever, right? I like having fun, and so I would have been happy with this so long as it was a decent adaptation that had a good bit of fun. This, I think, is an excellent adaptation. It is also a good bit of fun. Anyway, to answer your question, I haven't. It's been on my list of the. It's like the history of video games, right?
In a sense, yeah. It's not quite as chronologically historical as I thought it was going to be, but it is mostly historically chronological.
Is it
But
arcade
it's-
games or console games?
Both.
Okay.
It shows the rise of the arcade and then the death of the arcade and then the rise of the console and then the development of the console. And what I've really enjoyed about it is I've watched it with both my boys who are now 15 and 12. And so often, because I'm now an old man, is whenever they're playing, and I feel bad for them, they've only got a PS4, you know. Oh, our poor kids. Rubbing tears from my eyes.
I hear them every day. Help, I'm being repressed.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed! Bloody peasant! Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, eh? That's what I'm on about. Do you see him repressing me?
That's it. That's it. God, we are just sucky parents. It's only a PS4. And whenever they're often playing their games, I'll say things like, back in my day, and then I'll go off on a tangent about Sonic the Hedgehog. But obviously for years they've been playing Minecraft, and I talked about how much Minecraft reminds me of Doom that we played back in the day.
Oh, which I never
Right?
played, but I know of
Like
it.
we moved, look how far away we moved from pixelated games.
Yeah.
Only to have our kids return to pixelated game.
Yeah.
And it always boggled my mind. And so I would always tell them about Doom. The series concludes with a look at Doom, which made me so
Really?
incredibly happy. So happy. And so, yeah, it doesn't come as much into the current state of affairs as I thought it might. I don't know if there's maybe going to be a second season of it since it kind of ended at, I think it's 6 episodes. But yeah, Doom was the last episode. So that gives you a sense of how far it got. One of the episodes before that was Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat.
Oh, okay.
Right, but then didn't go into Tekken, for example, on the PlayStation.
Yeah, it sounds as if it was purposefully incomplete. There must be a second series or
Yeah, I
season
wonder.
that they're working on.
I wonder, but it was really good. And then the episode where they finally got to Sonic, oh, I was so happy. That was my game. I was
Sonic? Really?
I was probably 17, coming 18 when the Sega bus came to my secondary school in Scotland.
Okay.
And two decks of the Sega bus, and I saw Sonic for the first time, and it just blew my mind.
What's a Sega bus?
So you know Sega, right?
Yeah, the gaming system, Sega Genesis, yeah, the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was just a corporate bus that had consoles and screens.
Oh, and you would just get on the bus, double decker,
yeah.
and
Yeah. And just play Sonic, get in queues with your friends, watch over shoulders.
oh,
It was amazing. I had a Commodore 64 at home
nice.
playing, Doom.
Yeah.
Pixelated Doom. And then this fast scrolling, like up, down, left, right game was happening, bright colors. The speed of it was remarkable. And oh yeah, I was in love, head over heels, just like Sonic himself. Yeah, blew me away. And so my poor kids, as we're watching this episode, I'm just fanboying out, and they're just like, poor dad. That's what he had to be excited about when he was a little bit older than us. Poor dad.
One of my old fellow high school students. I wouldn't call him a friend because we weren't friends in high school. Secretly, we were nemesises. He didn't know that. We're not anymore. Anyway, he posted recently a video. It's like maybe 3-4 minute video of this arcade that I used to go to every weekend in Waterbury, Connecticut. It was called Crazy Eights, and it was right next to a movie theater in the Colonial Plaza. And so, right, my mom and dad divorced in the very early 80s, so Fridays, Saturdays, I would be with him, and it was movies in the arcade and you know, playing all the games like Dragon's Lair and Alien Syndrome and Missile Command and that, you know, all of these games. Anyway, watching that video, seeing the people from the early 80s and like all of the 17, 18-year-old boys that had thick Jim Croce mustaches and feathered hair and like, you know, those belly showing sporty arm cut off tank tops and short shorts.
Dude, you're describing the documentary we just finished. It shows like competitions that were being held.
Yeah.
You know, gaming competitions, the guys who were at it, and they're like, yeah, and this was the under 16s division. And there's like guys in there that look like 30-year-old steel workers. It's like, I don't think kids look like that anymore.
Nope. Do you have anywhere near you?
You got to watch it this weekend. You have to watch it this weekend.
I will do. Delma is currently watching Impractical Jokers, and she will not stop laughing. And I'm told that I need to watch that too.
Oh, I hate my kids watching that show because, again, yeah, they just cackle at it.
It's nonstop. So, but I don't want to go down that route. I want to stay in this arcade.
Kids and their happiness. It just makes me sick.
So infuriating. Do you have anywhere near you a barcade? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. The closest, I suppose, is where you were with us and your family last summer, which is Ruby's Arcade.
So there is Ruby's Arcade. So beers, arcade games, duck pin bowling, foosball.
Pool tables, ping pong tables, air hockey. Yep. And then it's got Donkey Kong Jr., Pac-Man, maybe Defender.
Oh, okay. So there's an actual chain of bars called Barcade. And we have one in New Haven. And it's like Ruby's is great because it has an assortment of, you know, different types of gaming. But Barcade is like a decent size arcade with all the old school games and rows of them for you to play. But then also go up to the bar and get just, you know, great craft ales and sours and saisons and like really good, well curated beers.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep. I love it.
Do you pay for the individual game time, or do you get a pass?
No, you
play
pay.
It's free for an hour.
If I'm not mistaken, it's either tokens or quarters. And the one in New Haven was, for the most part, old school pricing. So a quarter gets you a gameplay. Some games it's 2 quarters. There's none of this, you know, dollar nonsense. Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
I almost want to say the arcade games at Ruby's are free.
Oh, and you just pay for a pass to play them.
No, you just walk up and play them if you're at Ruby's. You buy passes for the other things, the pool table, the ping pong. Obviously, the duck pin is the real money maker.
Oh, yeah.
There's always a queue for that, always a list being maintained. But yeah, you can just walk up to one of the arcade games and play it.
Whoa, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
All right, I'll I'll see you this Thanksgiving.
That's it. We'll be there. We'll show up on Ruby's door, no doubt about it. Gotta give Mimi her favorite pizza.
God, you've broken this girl. This girl lives 15 minutes from the best pizza in America. And because she wants to be the contrarian that her dad is always, she's like, oh, Ruby's, give me pizza from nowhere near New Haven.
I just love watching your face drop every time I utter that sentence. It just makes me so happy.
So upsetting. So upsetting.
All right, listen, let's stop being upset. We're in a little spate right now of solo interviews. And I think this is kind of fun.
Yeah, so while you were interviewing the author, Karen Abbott, I was with Madhu Kanna from Indri, or Piccadilly Distilleries, who have a malt distillery that produce a whiskey that they're now calling Indri. And so I was with him in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, just bopping around here and there. And, I mean, you'll hear him talk about it, but until recently, have you ever heard of Indri?
I have not. No.
Not.
And when you said you were on a market visit and you said Indri, that was the first time for me. So and I do have a follow-up question.
Yeah, okay.
When you're saying Piccadilly Distilleries, is that what you said a second ago? Piccadilly Distilleries?
Yeah. Yep.
So is that just the name of the company, or are there multiple distilleries in play under this brand?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So Piccadilly is a company that owns many businesses, including hospitality, like hotels and things like that. And but then they also own distilleries. There's malt. They make malt. They make rum. They're making different kinds of alcohols for different purposes. And their malt distillery, which was built in 2010, started actually maturing liquid in 2012. They've been making malt whiskey for RØDE, for Paul John, for lots of different companies that not making single malt for them so they can release it as a single malt, but for various blends, right? All these companies have, products where they're going to blend malt with cane products, rum-like things to create a quote-unquote Indian-style whiskey. And they're all doing that, right? They're all kind of making malt and sharing it around. But the difference was this distillery that creates the Indri single malt, their sole purpose, just like with Glenallachie, right? It used to be to produce malt to go into blends. This distillery's sole purpose was to make malt to go into blends. And it was only until recently that they said, maybe we should do our own malt whiskey. And so actually they've got Surinder, who was RØDE's previous master distiller, master blender, now they're master blender there, which is pretty cool. So they're really they hit the ground running, and they got the right people in play. They're making fantastic liquid. And like, I didn't know Madhu at all. I'd never met him before. What an absolute sweetheart of a guy. And
Nice.
and you'll hear it in the interview, he's just as we had never heard of Madhu before, like we'd never heard of Indri before. He's a guy who's been in the industry for years now, right? He was with Paul John, and he knows Ashok from RØDE. You'll hear all of that, and it was just really nice to get to know him, get to know the distillery, and wow people with the whiskey. It's a remarkable liquid, Jason. It really is. I'm not going to call it surprisingly good. I'm not surprised that it's good.
I know, right?
Right?
It's such a fine line to tread there.
But I think it's so well put together, and it ticks all of the boxes. And like Paul John, like RØDE, it's so uniquely Indian, which I absolutely love. We talked about it. We talked about it a few seasons back, where we went to the Cadenheads warehouse, and I was, blind tasting some casks, and they sneakily put a Paul John in front of me, and I said, "This is not Scotch. I think this may be from India," and it was, right. And I'm not saying that to say, "Ooh, I know my Indian malts." I'm saying that to point out that it's clear Indian malt has a very specific style that's outside of Scottish malt.
So given that this was a market visit, Indri is in the Impex portfolio now?
So Indri is now within the Impex portfolio. However, at the time of this recording, and this is 19th of August, Friday, the liquid was actually meant to hit the Impex warehouse in like April or May or some ridiculous time like that.
There was a delay? Why?
I don't know. Is something going on? Are multiple things going on? Anyway, so now the ETA is August 23rd, but to the Impex warehouse. But I just don't trust it.
So the day before this very episode drops.
Yeah, but I want to believe it with all my heart.
Yeah.
because I want to share it around. It's really turning heads, and I'm really excited to put it in front of people. So yes, it's in the Impex portfolio, and it will soon start hitting store shelves. It's just one product. It's called Trini, which is Sanskrit for three woods, TRINI, and so it's ex-bourbon, ex-PX, and ex-red wine cask.
Interesting. Okay. But I don't know why, but in my mind, I'm thinking of M&H when I'm hearing red wine casks. Maybe because they've pulled it off successfully, and that's now where my mind goes. And so to think of that mix happening with an Indian malt that's in the Impex portfolio, like interesting. It's interesting looking for those types of flavor patterns, flavor trends.
Yep.
And so that's interesting that you say that. All right, listen, we could keep going here.
Yep.
Should we jump into this interview? This will be me hearing it for the first time, so I'm excited, and then we'll have a few more words on the other side of it.
Sounds good to me. Well, Madhu, Kanna, it's an absolute pleasure having you with me on our podcast. And it's been an absolute pleasure just the past 2 days. We've been together 2 days traveling, yes?
Yes, Joshua.
It's been an absolute pleasure driving around with you and experiencing a bit of America through the lens of Indian single malt whiskey.
I must say the pleasure is mine because I have never met an interesting personality like you for a lot of things. One, for your sense of humor. Second, for your knowledge of what you possess on different single malts around the world.
Yeah, thank you.
Third, the open mindset you have towards approaching different whiskies. Because when I see you tasting a bourbon or a rye or a single malt from Scotland, or from any destination around the world, be it Israel or Australia, or you're very open to flavors. You're tasting it without prejudice, and that's something that I learned from you over the last 2 days, I must admit.
Wow, I'm really bad with compliments, so I'm just gonna say thank you. And
sometimes it's okay to take some.
Yeah, I know. I'm just not very good at it. But seriously, bottom of my heart, thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot. She can get me choked up. We haven't even started this conversation here. So we're sitting right now in a hotel room.
Absolutely.
And so as we've been going around, I've been listening to you talk about Indri, and specifically the Trini whiskey, which we're sipping on. And I'd like to go over that in a little bit. I would also like to touch on your background for the purposes of just sort of laying down the groundwork here, or laying a foundation down. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Indri as a distillery, because it's something that few people have ever heard of. However, it's been around for almost 10 years now, producing whiskey. Can you talk about that and why that is?
Sure. So Indri is the inaugural single malt brand from Piccadilly Distilleries. Piccadilly with one L and not two L, as it's supposed to be. So from Piccadilly Distilleries, it's a group in India which has been into multiple business. The closest that to associate with alcohol is sugar manufacturing, ethanol. So a lot of sugarcane fields in India. So, we are into sugar manufacturing. We are into ethanol. We are into extra neutral alcohol, and we also the group is also into hospitality business. They own a couple of hotels, and they franchise it out to different chains.
The Piccadilly Hotel.
Piccadilly Hotels.
Oh, okay.
Most of the hotels are now franchised to bigger brands. Because it's easier to build a hotel and franchise it to a brand than just owning up and maintaining it yourself.
Got it.
So even some of the hotels are still called Piccadilly. There's a hotel in Chandigarh, in Punjab, which is the capital of Punjab and Haryana. So two states owning the same capital in India.
Oh, okay.
So that's an interesting point, right?
Yeah.
So we have some hotels still named in the Piccadilly. Some of them are franchised out to other groups. So natural progression for the company was to get into beverage alcohol, and they started manufacturing, the IMFL, or Indian made foreign liquor, and the Indian liquor, which is basically extra neutral alcohol with flavored, spirits and sugars and stuff like that. But that's something that's been in India for a long time. There are so many distilleries in India, and everybody does that, and most of them do it across. But then this vertical, what we are talking about, Indri, from the Piccadilly malt plant, we call it as a malt plant internally, because when we say distillery, it's about anything that we distill. It could be extra neutral alcohol distillation, etc. So specifically inside the organization, we call it as a malt plant. So the malt plant was set up in the year 2010, and 2012 was when we started distilling completely and then filling up things in the barrels and stuff like that. We are proud to say that we are India's largest independent malt manufacturer in terms of capacity and seller of malt spirit in bulk.
Yeah, so capacity, that was something that really surprised me, and you've heard me say it a few times in the past couple of days, but talk quickly about your stills, your size of the stills, and your overall output.
We have 6 copper pot stills in the distillery.
Yeah.
The wash stills are 25,000 liters each.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 3 pairs. So a pair of wash and a spirit. So 6 stills. The wash stills are 25,000 liters, and the spirit stills are about 15,000 liters each. We distill about approximately 12,000 liters per day, and approximately 4 million liters annually. That's our production capacity, and that's what we operate at.
That really is amazing. So thank you for laying that down for our listeners. Here's the comparison I make. And this will be an interesting comparison for our listeners, because there's another comparison that I usually make. So the other comparison is when I talk about Kilchoman, we say Kilchoman has, about 500,000 liters of spirit per year. That's what they produce annually. So what they produce in a year, Kalila produces in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Right? Now, Kalila has an overall capacity 7 million liters, but my understanding is the past few years, they have been producing 4 million liters of spirit per year, just like yourselves. And when we think about Kalila, that's one of the backbone malts to Johnny Walker Black, the biggest blend, or one of the biggest blends, Scotch whiskey blends that there are out there, and that's your capacity.
Right.
To be the backbone of one of the largest blends by comparison.
Right.
That's wild to me. Again, back to the thought that we hadn't heard of you. You've just been sort of quietly in the background making malt for other distilleries for their blends and things like that.
Yes. So everything that we produced till about a year back was sold in bulk as bulk malt to other distilleries in India, so that they can just bottle it and blend it with their things.
Yeah.
And it was only the 2020 late 2020s the idea of launching a single malt conceptualized. Probably that was there in the minds of the owners, but I think it really started materializing and coming together in 2020. The pandemic hit, and so everything was slow. We took our time.
Oh, so you were meant to launch in 2020?
No, the thought process.
Oh, the thought process. Yeah,
right.
gotcha. Yeah.
As to what should be the right name, what should be the right way to do it, what kind of cask will we use, etc., etc. And then since the pandemic hit, everything was slow. So 2021, we've been going through multiple iterations at the distillery before we launched the single malt at around November 2021 in India.
Okay.
So precisely, it was a very few bottles that were produced, mainly to gift and tell the world that we've just launched a single malt whiskey. But then actually the market started receiving the malt end of December, early January 2022.
Okay.
So we are probably 8-9 months year old brand. So Indri is it's not even celebrated its first birthday.
It's amazing. So, I mean, that really is amazing, considering you're in a few markets now and expanding to others. Why start your own single malt brand, though? If you were doing tons of business, producing 4 million liters of spirit per year, selling to anyone who will buy for whatever their needs are, why have your own brand if business was just fine as it was?
Very interesting question. Actually, the current we call him promoter because not the owner exactly or chairman exactly.
Okay.
Because the gentleman's father, Mr. Vinod Sharma, is the one who set up the distillery and set up the unit and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mr. Siddharth Sharma, who's the son of the owner, is the current person who operates the day-to-day operations and looks care of the brand and creation of the brand, etc. Mr. Vinod Sharma actually did not think of launching a single malt. It was there in his mind, but then putting together a team, putting together a vision, and it can't be just one expression and then you forget about it, right? We are a distillery. I think about a year and a half ago, even before the pandemic, we launched a blended whiskey in our portfolio called Whistler.
Okay.
So Whistler is a blended whiskey, which has got a huge amount of malt spirit in it, and that was launched by the distillery. The distillery already had blended whiskeys under different names like Golden Wings and other things in India, which were merely did not succeed the way we wanted it to succeed.
Is the grain whiskey your own as well?
Yeah, the grain whiskey was our own as well, and we used our own malt spirit to it, and we kind of bottled it, right? Now, in a country like India, if you have to create a brand, you need to have big money, right?
Yeah.
Because you're fighting with the big beasts, right? The big giants who have the money and who have the wherewithal to create a brand. So your liquid can be good, but if you don't really know how to market it and have the money to back it and the focus to do it across it, you can just easily fall flat. So I think with multiple businesses in the family, this was just a part of the business, making malt spirit and selling malt spirit in bulk. But the current promoter or the current owner of the company, Mr. Siddharth, he's a visionary, right? Okay. So there's something that I'm going to tell you, which I've probably not shared with you in the last 2 days, is that our distillery, the vision is to become just not a single malt, but also a distillery that produces gin, vodka, and other spirits of premium quality. Yeah. So you are actually a company that produces a lot of spirits. And the second thing, which would be a surprise to you, is that we have just bought a piece of land of Argyll in Scotland.
Oh.
And we are setting up our own distillery over there in Scotland as well.
Whoa. That is awesome.
Right?
We're allowed to share that? Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, so the point of this conversation is Indri, but I am so curious. Can we stay there for a second? Do you have thoughts of the type of spirit you're looking for? What else are you allowed to share?
No, we just done the process of setting up a distillery. We just identified a piece of land.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have to set up our. The entire thing is from the scratch, right? We just identified land. It is in a place called as Portavadi. Portavadi. It's the land has been identified. Everything has been done. We are in the process of designing. It'll not be a huge plant. It'll be a small plant with a few thousand liters of distillation every year. But that's something that will take some time. A couple of years to do. But just to tell that it's not just a thought that has come that we should launch a single malt whiskey and then do it.
Yeah.
I think the owners are thinking long term. How do we expand and become a world brand, right?
Gotcha.
Slowly and steadily, we want to expand our portfolio. I don't know the purpose, right? The purpose could be just having a distillery in Scotland or making bulk spirit over there, a malt spirit over there, and bringing the malt spirit, marrying it across, blending. We don't know what it is across. So I have never asked Siddharth, my chairman, as to, hey, why are we doing this, right?
Yeah.
Probably he has something in mind, but then we are doing that as well. So the reason why I shared this with you and with our listeners over here is that we just coming up with a single malt was something that was bound to happen. It just took time. And it just is happening now.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is that we're going to launch India's first cane juice rum, pure agricole style cane juice rum, and it's aged for 12 years, and that's a different story at all right? So there's so many things happening in the background. It's just not Indri, and Indri Trini is our inaugural expression, and we hope to come up with a lot more stuffs from our distillery, and therefore become a true distillery that it's just not a malt distillery but also produces a lot of other spirits and do things
Beauty. So speaking of Trini, do you still have Trini in your
yes
in your plastic cup?
Beautiful plastic cup. It reminds me of India. Because in India, people want to get a quick drink before they get home, or they sneak out with their friends, go to a liquor shop, buy a bottle, and then buy 2 plastic cups, pour the liquid into the cups, top it up with soda or water, gulp it down, and then quietly go and have a meal and get home. So
amazing. Because it's typically not acceptable to be.
Depends upon which part of India you're from. A lot of places in the northern part of India, like Punjab, and I'm talking about traditional, right? Not the urban. The urban cities, we have microbreweries and some of the best whiskey bars and stuff that's happening across. And it's okay to have. It's okay for both men and women to drink. And it's like my generation, we accept it, right? But if I have to go a generation back, and even some conservative states in the southern part of India, it's very interesting that. Drinking is still considered as a bad habit. Reason because people don't drink to socialize. People drink to get intoxicated. And when they drink to get intoxicated, it becomes a habit so bad that they can survive without it. So people go to extremes, and therefore, like, they become alcoholic, and therefore it's considered a bad thing to do, and therefore people start hiding when they want to drink and all these things.
Which I think would exacerbate the issue, right? If you have to hide it, if it, I'm no sociologist, but they talk about, especially with children, if you normalize the idea of alcohol consumption, then it doesn't become this taboo thing that they want to do and sneak. And sneaking can become a problematic thing. So it's unfortunate that is still happening in some spots, because I imagine that maybe a negative.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But things are changing. Like for me, I have my friends over at home. I drink at home. I share my liquid.
Yeah.
My son very well knows that dad is having his whiskey and
Yeah.
dad is having his beer. And once in a while, he's 9 years old. Once in a while, I say, hey, do you want to take a sip? You want to sniff it?
Yeah.
He comes and takes a small sip and he says, oh, he doesn't like it or he
Yeah,
likes
sure.
it.
Yeah.
Or he tells some flavors and things which are very interesting. And sometimes he goes and tells my wife and she comes chasing behind me, oh, you're spoiling my kid. So yeah, everything can happen, right? So things are changing. But my times, I don't drink in front of my parents, or when even if my parents are at home, I don't think I'll just go out and drink and get back home, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's a possibility even today for me. I hope my dad is not listening to the podcast.
Oh, wow. Oh, he's been a subscriber to the podcast since day one. Mr. Kanna, we call him around these parts. So with the Indri Trini in mind and in our glasses, one of the interesting things that we found today in the tasting we did this evening at Julio's here in Massachusetts is we tasted the Indri Trini first, and then had an Oishi, an M&H, a Glenallachie, a McNair's, and then we went back to the Indri Trini. And at first, it was, for my palate, it was spicy, soft, a little buttery. Not very fruity. It was just more on the spice and the grain and the maybe some of the fruits coming through with the red wine. Then after we had all of those other whiskeys, it especially and maybe because it was after the peat, it was nothing but tropical fruits, mangoes and guava and grilled pineapple and kumquats and all of these fruits jumping all over my tongue. And so I guess the point I'm trying to get to is I want to talk about where your flavor is coming from. Obviously, there's the casks that I know we want to discuss, but I think your point of difference starts a little earlier with your grain. And so I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, because it's unique when compared to what Scotland is doing.
Right. And I agree, it's got to do with possibly the grain, possibly the fermentation as well. So the grain is an Indian barley that we use. Now, Indian barley is grown in Rajasthan, which is on the which is a state closer to where the distillery is located. For hundreds of years, it's a native barley, and the 6-row barley is the husk is more. The grains are smaller inside. This is sent to a maltery where malting takes place. And the malted barley comes to our distillery for further process, which is basically starting from, you're mashing to fermentation and, it goes through all the process. Now, the new make spirit itself gives it has a fruitier note right there.
Oh, okay.
Right? So when we taste a new make spirit, just immediately after distillation, there is a note of fruitiness right in the spirit as well.
Is it like a pear-like fruitiness?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A
Okay.
pear, apple, kind of a fruity note that comes in.
Okay.
With a nice sweet note to the liquid, right?
Yeah.
So that I think is what translates to the lot of fruits that comes along, the citrusy notes that comes along with the oak and stuff like that. But I think the grain has a contribution to the liquid. Even after fermentation, if you drink the juice, you'll find that fruitiness there.
Okay.
So
you mean the wash?
Tasting the wash.
Tasting the wash.
Tasting the wash gives that a little bit of nice fruity taste to it.
Okay.
I would just say that the grain has got a lot to do with that fruity flavors coming in.
And so your fermentation times, do you know your fermentation times, and how does your climate affect that, if at all?
So our distillery is located in a place which has a very subtropical climate.
Yeah.
We vary between 0 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius in summer. That's about 32 in the winter,
Yeah.
32 to 40 in the winter, and can go up to 122 Fahrenheit in the summer. Right?
That's so ridiculous.
Yes, and I'm not exaggerating a bit, because the last time I was there in the distillery about a month ago, it was 48. 48 degrees
like
Celsius, like 118, 118,
yeah, something like that, yeah.
right? And you just get, it's like as if somebody is sucking the blood out of your head.
Yep.
The heat is, it's so hot,
Yeah.
and it's dry. So you don't literally sweat so much unless you're in a closed space.
Yeah.
But then when you're walking out or standing out, you feel like the sun is just putting a straw in your head and sucking out all the water and juices in your body, right? That's
Yeah.
the kind of heat
Yeah.
we're talking about. And for me, being somebody who's from the southern part of India, where I live, Bangalore, the climate is kind of moderate. It's beautiful, pleasant throughout the year. I don't think I can adapt to that temperature. Whereas people living locally over there are
just how
adaptable.
they live.
They just adapt to it. They're okay with it. They work.
Yeah.
There are laborers who work outside, right, in that heat. So I think it's a lot to do with adaptability.
Okay.
Now, coming to the distillery, the summer our fermentation times are lower. We ferment about 40 to 45 hours.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
And in the winter, it goes up by another 10 to 15 hours.
Okay, so a relatively short fermentation time.
time.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the other way it impacts is the barrels, right? This extreme temperature, it impacts the barrels. We lose approximately 12 to 13% in the first year of our maturation. And then going forward, we lose approximately about 10% every year, 10% every year. So to be very frank, since we have not emptied a cask to bottle as a single cask, we actually want to see when we do our first single cask of a 6 year or 7 year as to how much liquid is left in the cask for us to really determine as to whether it's going to be 120 liters out of a 200 liter bourbon cask that I'm talking about, right? Or 120, 110 liters or 100 liters. We don't know.
Sure.
Yeah. So our guesstimate is that, or what we think is that there should be about 120 liters left after 5 or 6 years of maturation.
120 liters from a 200 liter bourbon barrel?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's losing about 40% or so. That's the assumption.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's a difference between your loss in bourbon barrels with American white oak and in your PX sherry casks, which is either European oak or Spanish oak, because you've got different porosity. Is that a word? I think it's a word.
Yeah.
You have different porosity going on there. And so I wonder if there would even be variation from the two different wood types.
Oh, yes, I think so.
Yeah.
But we are yet to assess it. It's an interesting thing for me to go back and check as to how much are we losing in our, the wine casks, the sherry casks, and, versus an American oak versus a European oak. Yeah, it will be a very interesting one to start.
So the other day I had asked you if you could identify a specific distillery character, or a character of your whiskey that you find through all of the spirit that you've tasted. For me, when I taste this, and this is the reason why I asked if there was pear on the new make, is I get this sort of baked pear with cinnamon right down the center palate. And that rang true, from today's tasting it first before all the other whiskeys, and then last. I got that through them. But you have a different thought on that, and I love this tasting note, and I would love for you to share it and maybe describe a little bit exactly what you mean.
So for me, when I taste different spirits out of different barrels, even outside the Trini that we have bottled, what I get is the old rug kind of flavor aroma that takes me to that smelling an old damp rug, or you're in a room where there is a lot of dampness and old rugs are there. That's a very unique thing that I get. Probably it's just me, but then there are a lot of things that different people get across. For me, that I think I identify that this spirit is from my distillery with that kind of a note to it. I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing, but then it's what I identify the spirit with. Of course, there is a bit of spiciness and oakiness in all the liquid. I think due to the temperature, we extract a lot of tannins actually. So I think the tannic nature is something that we are struggling with because our liquid turns tannic quickly. So we need to manage the level of tannins in the liquid and try and see that we bring a beautiful balance in whatever we bottle. So that's one challenge that we will have to face.
So how do you face that? Are you currently working mostly with first fill casks, or do you have to work with second fill and refill casks to combat that potential?
I think what we are having in our distillery is a lot of second fill and third fill casks. We also do have first fill casks. We have a small cooperage inside the distillery to do charring and recharring of the barrels and fixing the barrels for leakages and stuff like that. So we do use a substantial amount of second fill casks, and especially a company that's been selling bulk spirit after selling this, emptying the barrels to sell the bulk malt. I think it goes into another fill and then so on and so forth. So I think that's one thing that we are doing. For us, one of the projects that we are doing today. Today, when I say this period, is that we are trying to get a proper identification of our barrels, right? The 40,000 barrels that's there in the distillery. We are trying to make sure that we are identifying it properly, getting to trace its origins, trace its roots, and that's what something that we are trying to do.
That could have been easier.
So we just moved to an Amrut 5-year, bottle specifically for the single cask nation.
Yes.
Right. A good friend, Ashok of Amrut, who's the current master distiller, who used to be the global, business head, ambassador for Amrut.
Yeah.
I think Amrut deserves a lot of credit for what it has done for the Indian single malt industry. And I think they took the hard step of walking out to the world and telling that Indians can make good single malt. And every time I see Amrut, I feel proud about it. So does Paul John, because they started off a bit late after Amrut, but I think they've experimented with a lot number of casks, totally different style, different venue. It's in Goa off the west coast. I think Paul John, Amrut, all these guys have paved way for good single malts out of India to come ahead and shine in the global market, and always close to my heart. Both these single malts. And interestingly, it's like a family, right?
I love that. And I told this to you earlier, or maybe yesterday. There's an obvious sense of pride. Isn't that nice? The texture is just syrupy. Yeah,
it's like maple syrup for me. Honey and that's a beautiful one. I do get the 62.8% ABV.
Yeah.
After I've finished the liquid.
Yeah.
But on the nose and on the palate, it doesn't come through.
It doesn't come through
at all. Right. The heat comes only after you finish it, but by then I've already tasted all the flavors. That's a beautiful bottling, actually.
Yeah, thank you. We were really happy with this, and we work with our friend Raj Sabharwal, dear friend of ours, who helped us with this cask, and we're just so honored to have bottled it. What was I saying? Oh, yes. So what I was saying is, there's this and I'm sure the listeners heard this, but you can hear the pride when you're talking about not just Indri and Piccadilly, but with Amrut and with Paul John as well. And I really appreciate that. And so I've got two questions for you. Is that there's that sense of Indian pride, right? Which I think comes through, and you talk about that with your packaging a little bit. I wonder, before we talk about an Amrut and Paul John connection, which I do want to get to, I wonder if you could talk about, there's some Sanskrit on your packaging, and then a red dot on there as well.
Right. So that's Indri, the name of the brand written in Hindi. We wanted to be boldly Indian. Tell the world that, hey, this is an Indian single malt, and the best way to for the world to associate us, or our own people. When I say our own people, Indians to associate with the brand is through the language, and the red dot on top of the I or E, Indri. So there is the first letter that you see is E, and that syllable, the top, the red dot, right, that you see is in.
So there,
E, and in the dots, this stresses on the Indri.
Okay.
Right? The below part that you see is actually Dri.
Okay.
Dri.
Oh, down there.
Down there. That is Dri.
I apologize to our listeners. We're describing something they can't see. But
right. Yeah.
Look in your mind's eye. Actually, listeners, what I'll do is I'm going to post a picture, and you'll be able to see exactly what Madhu is talking about. So look for that on our Facebook page. Anyway, continue.
Right. So we've tried to write Indri in Hindi, so it's easily associated with the country. And Hindi is the largest spoken language in India. Almost every state and people across the length and breadth of the country speak Hindi. And the red dot that you see, it's not a perfect circle. It's like as if you've touched a vermilion with your red thumb and put it on somebody's forehead.
Yeah.
So when you come to India or Indian homes, or when you finish praying, or when anything auspicious starts with people greeting the others with a red vermilion on the forehead.
So
right?
you don't put that on yourself. Someone puts that.
That on you. Wow. There are occasions where you put it on your own self.
Sure.
But usually when you're welcoming somebody, you just take a red vermilion and put it on the forehead. So if you are a tourist and staying at one of the traditional hotels in India, the first thing that they do is when you enter, especially in touristic locations like Kerala, Goa, and the hill stations of North India, everywhere, they just make sure that they welcome you by putting a small red vermilion on your forehead. So we try to bring subtly, not very boldly, but very subtly, yet proudly, a lot of India on the Indri that we have written in Hindi over there. Of course, we have written Indri Indian single malt or single malt Indian whiskey at the bottom in English. But then I think we consciously took the decision of writing Indri in Hindi right on the packaging.
I love that, and I really, when you talk about welcoming someone by putting that upon their forehead, that's a really beautiful gesture. I think that's really cool.
Right?
Yeah. So quickly back to Amrut and Paul John. So there's two connections here. You have your own personal connection to Paul John from your previous life, which I'd like to talk about as well. But then there's a connection to the distillery from Amrut. So I wonder if you can maybe first talk about the Amrut connection, and then I'd love to hear a bit of your history with Paul John, if you don't mind.
See, when I in my previous the previous role that I was playing before Indri was, I was heading the international business for Paul John.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about single malts. When I'm talking about early 2010, 11, 12, right? 2012 to be precise. I know nothing about single malt whiskey. I was a guy who was happily drinking blended whiskeys made in India.
Yeah.
And if I get a Scottish blended whiskeys, that was like, wow, we're drinking a nice Scotch today, right? Because it just gave you less hangover. Right. So that was the reason why, a lot of people prefer scotches, because it kind of gives you a little bit less hangover, even if you're drinking, let's say, a few pours extra. Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the blended malts, which is either from sugarcane molasses with a little bit of malt spirit, or from grain based with a little bit of malt spirit, is not as pure as 100%, or
sure.
or probably not distilled in copper pot stills. It must be distilled in column stills, or whatever it is across, right? So the purer spirits, and it was a treat. But at that point of time itself, we used to hear an Indian whiskey, won the third best whiskey in the world with the Whiskey Bible. We used to hear so much about Amrut, and and what is this Amrut? What is this Amrut? Right? We're curious about it, right? We always did. When I started taking Paul John and going around the market, I could see Amrut everywhere. Right from UK to the US to Europe and everywhere. And I know that there's somebody who's put in a lot of hard work behind. Of course, the distillery, the people at the distillery, Mr. Surinder, who's the first person to distill and mature and try and put together something like. I think, but I also believe that Ashok of Amrut has done a lot of job for the brand.
Yeah.
And when I was in Germany for doing a market visit, I see Ashok standing outside a whiskey store, and we know each other, but we've not met. And more so, I know him because I've been looking up to him.
Sure.
So he was standing outside a shop and lighting up a cigarette, and he was just standing over there. So I was on a market visit with my importer, and I said, "Oh, that's Ashok." I just walked up to him and I said, "Sir, I'm from India, and we have heard so much about Amrut, and I'm a big fan of yours."
Yeah.
And Ashok is like caught by surprise. He's like, he just thought I'm just another fan of Amrut, right? Who's probably living in Germany and doing something in Germany and just walking up. He said, "Oh, yeah, very nice, very nice. How are you? What are you doing?" And stuff like that. And then after a bit of time, I told him that I'm Madhu from Paul John. And then from that day, we are great friends.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We are great friends. We share a lot. We do talk a lot. I like his ideologies. We believe that the Indian single malt as an industry should grow. The world should recognize that India can make quality single malts, and show the world that we are capable of doing something which is recognized worldwide. Both in terms of science and art, and I think we share same values when it comes to that. More so, he's a great soul. So that's mine. And I was with Paul John. The second association with Paul John, I was with them till 2019. And it was an interesting journey with them, because we took Paul John from almost just the UK to almost 40 countries over a period of 7-8 years. Mr. Paul himself,
40 countries.
Yes, 40 countries.
Wow.
And Mr. Paul himself is a very hands-on person. So he loves tasting, and he's kind of the person who mentors Michael in making sure what kind of expression should come across. And Michael is a genius. Michael D'Souza, the master distiller of Paul John, he's a genius. A very quiet guy, but I always believe quiet people are naughty, so so I keep pulling his leg. So Mr. Paul John, who's the founder of Paul John John Distilleries, and Michael have a lot to do for the brand, and just not them, the entire team at Paul John, I think, struggled. They were hustling to make sure that they can get the world the best of what India can produce. And therefore, great respects for these two brands. Just not them. There are other distilleries out of India making single malt whiskies. The only thing that we hope, or I personally hope, not associating with any other brand, but just I personally hope, is that every distillery that makes single malt out of India upkeeps the quality and whatever hard work brands have put behind years of hard working and telling the world that India can make great single malt whiskies, right?
That's a really good point, as it's a relatively newer category, and you all need to be great to lift your categories. So far, it seems you're doing an okay job with that.
Right. So one thing that I see a lot changing over the last 10 years of selling single malts around the world is that I think right from the importers to distributors to retail owners are quite open to a world category, to an Indian single malt category.
Yeah.
When I used to enter Paul John for spirits competition 5-6 years ago, there used to be a world whiskey category. Today, almost all the competitions have world whiskey, under which there's a whiskey for India, Japan, Australia, rest of the world, right? So which says that the world has moved on, right? And even competitions, be it whiskeys of the world or anybody, most of the competitions have a category for Indian single malt separately, for Australian single malt separately, for Irish malt separately. Earlier it was, let's say, the bourbon, Irish, Scotland, rest of the world.
Yeah.
Right? Now it's changed. It's breaking, right? Israel, right? We talk about milk and honey, right?
Yeah.
They've been doing some fantastic jobs. So there's a category for Israeli whiskeys also that's popping up.
Yeah.
So that shows that the world has slowly started accepting that, hey, there are good malts that can be produced everywhere in the world. And it's just a totally different style. And we just need to be open. And that's what I really liked about you. When I started this conversation, I was just sharing. It's about how open you are when you are just sipping the whiskey, right? And not saying that, hey, this is crap, or this is not aged, or this is, this is probably finished in this cask, right? I think the moment we come with that prejudice while handling, while having a dram in our hand, we are blocking just not our senses, but also closing our minds to some wonderful spirits around the world.
Exactly. Yeah, when you come to it with a preconceived notion of what it could be or should be. Yeah. This is a question that's been playing around in my mind for a while, and this isn't necessarily specific to you, though I'm going to ask you for your experience. When I think of distilleries that are working in warmer weather countries where you have angel shares of 10%, 12%, 14%, and so on, and so you're losing a lot of liquid, and you run the chance of having a more astringent or tannic product if you don't get it out of cask in time. How does that affect you from a logistics standpoint? From, of creating a product and needing to get it out there and selling it to countries, knowing that, like a fruit, whiskey can be underripe, it could be ripe, and it could be overripe, and you need to manage your inventory and sell it before it gets overripe. So how do you? Is that something you think about? Is that something you deal with?
I think that's the biggest worry for any distillery in India. Right? As to how do I get my liquid not overage, not get tannic, not get astringent, so that it spoils the liquid and I'm not able to either use it for anything or use it in my whiskeys across. Second thing, it's a big challenge because you're just creating a brand, right? Amrut, it's been almost 15-20 years, and they just I think they are a brand now, right? When you think about Indian single malts, I think people say Amrut, right? I speak to people who have just tasted Amrut once in their life, and then still they remember and say, when I say I'm working for an Indian single malt, the first thing they ask is, are you working for Amrut, right? So I think they have created that brand over these many years, right? But then they had a capacity which was small, which they expanded as they grew, and I think even today everything that's produced out of Amrut is sold.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So their distillation capacity and maturation capacity meets their requirements of the market. Now, for a slightly bigger distillery, which has bigger production capacities, which has more storage, it's going to be a challenge. And I think that's one of the reasons why we still continue to sell our bulk malt spirits to other distilleries in India, because if you're not using it at the right time, rather give it to somebody who can use it across. going forward, it's going to be very interesting and challenging for us to see how we are going to manage the spirits that are aged and it's got that astringent quality. What I think, this is my personal thought, is to marry it with younger liquids, younger age liquids, and see what's happening across. Cross marry it with different kinds of cask to see how it changes and develops. Lower the ABV at different percentage to see how that changes the quality of the whiskey. So I think these are a few things that I'm just I'm no blender, I'm no distiller, I'm not somebody who knows the science of it. My job is to find markets and get the products across. But I think these are few things that I think we should be doing, or switching, marrying a 2-year and a 7-year and putting it into a totally different cask and see how they are evolving. So these are things that we should be doing, and I'm sure we are doing certain things back in the distillery, but it's going to be a challenge. Who knows, we may even have to empty some barrels just out in the drain, if it turns so astringent that we can't use it for anything. So that's a challenge that we will face and will continue to face.
Okay. We're getting close to our time here, and there's a question that we always get our interviewees out on, but I wanted to, before we got there, I wanted to talk quickly about some of your staff, right? Your distiller and your blender. So I'm looking at your tin here, and your master distiller is Graham Bowie. I imagine that's David Bowie's nephew, something like this. And I cannot read his signature, but that is Surinder from Amrut.
Right.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about them?
Right. Very interestingly, while I'm sure the liquid Indri, Trini that we are having today was distilled a long time back, because Trini is an average age of about 6 years. So we have a 5, 6, and a 7-year-old liquid that's married and put into the put into a vat, and we've bottled this single malt. So I'm sure it was distilled long back. Graham Bowie from Scotland, who used to be with Tom Int'l and other distilleries in Scotland, joined us about a year ago to become our master distiller at the distillery.
Oh my gosh, I've been to Tom Int'l or near there. The weather from Tom Int'l to the weather where your distillery is.
And I think you got
Graham.
it right. I think it was difficult for us to retain Graham with us, because it is totally different weather, culture, and people. So unfortunately, Graham had to leave us last couple of months back.
The weather killed him.
The weather killed him. Yeah, he used to turn red in the distillery in the morning. He comes in, right? You go at 11 o'clock. He usually wears a very light dress and comes, but he's already sweating, and he's done by within 2 hours after he comes to the distillery. So I think Graham could not survive that intense thing. Although I think he did his best to give back to the distillery whatever he could. And he's a great guy. I had few conversations with him, and he's a great gentleman. So Graham has left us, unfortunately.
Okay.
But Surinder stays with us. He's currently doing the job of the blender. So Surinder was the founding. We used to call him the founding father of single malts in India, because he was with Amrut right from day one, distilling and maturing and making sure he was doing everything. So he brings with him a wealth of experience. He retired out of Amrut a couple of years ago, and he's then been an independent consultant thereafter. So then we had asked him to be our master blender, and he kindly agreed on. And it's his hands that's gone behind creating, drawing the best of the barrels from our warehouse and putting them together to create this magnificent liquid, I think, called Indri, because it's very different. We are probably the first distillery in India to come up with a triple wood finish, something which is filled in X bourbon, X wine, and XPX cask. And Surinder keeps telling that I've tried to ensure that there is an adequate balance of all the three casks, and none of the casks overpower the character over the other casks. So that's the ode to Surinder, and that's how it is.
Does he talk about why that marriage of those three particular casks why that was originally his recipe?
So we had different casks sitting when the distillery was handed over to him, right? We had different casks sitting with our distillery. A few of them were 3 years, a few of them were 5 years, a few of them were 6 years, 7 years. So he said that I don't have the right liquid of just one cask to just launch an expression of this cask, right? And he also wanted to do something different. Let's say Paul John or Amrut has an ex-bourbon finish, or an ex-PX finish, right? So we wanted to do something which is very different. Second, we wanted to have the right barrels and the right kind of liquid to do a pure ex-bourbon or an ex-wine and stuff like that. I thought Surendra felt confident in bringing 3 different liquids together and doing something which is very unique and different from the other things, just not to just stand amongst the other Indian distilleries, but also to show the world that you know we are a new distillery, and the first expression we come up is a 3-word, which is putting the benchmark high. But I think that's what he believes in, and he's done a good job. I feel so.
I think the whiskey is fantastic. I was texting earlier with a friend, I can't get over how expressive it is and how confident it is. It's a whiskey that feels like it knows what it wants to do, and it tells you what it's going to do. It's not hiding anything. Like nuance comes out, and we've experienced that earlier in the tasting, and maybe adding a little bit of water, but there's not a bit of shyness to this whiskey in any way, and this is the only Indri I've had, so I need to experience more to maybe understand where that's coming from. But I think when I think of the blend that Surendra has put together with the red wine, the PX, and the bourbon, and those red wine casks don't make the whiskey taste just like wine. It's the fruit from the wine. I don't know if you have opinions on that, how that's able to be accomplished. There's so few distilleries where I've tasted their whiskey that's been matured in wine where the whiskey doesn't just taste like high-octane wine. And I wonder if you have opinions on that, if you know how you're able to accomplish that, and maybe that's a secret that Surendra has.
Oh, I think we should do a separate podcast with Surendra and get all the secrets out.
Oh, okay. Does he not tell you much?
Oh, we spend a very little time together.
Yeah.
Because he stays in the distillery, and the distillery is far from the office where we sit. And I get to visit the distillery once in a while. And then I try to speak to him the whole day like a kid who's asking his father, what's that? What is this? Why is that? Why is this?
Yeah.
And he, like a father, explains patiently that, hey, this is this, Madhu. This is this, Madhu.
Yeah.
Oh, it's nice that you're asking me this question. And he's one person who's never come back to me with no answer, right? We ask him, he's always there to think. So I think I need to be more of the curious child for me to learn more about that. Yeah, so that's something that I think I need to learn there. Just brings that responsibility in me to learn more about what's happening.
Yeah, it's I've asked this question of Tomer Goran at M&H because they have their Elements red wine, which does not taste winey. It's earthy. And I asked him why, and he kindly explained that they're using Israeli wines, and the grapes used for Israeli wines are completely different. I forget the varietal he mentioned, but it's a wine you simply don't find. It's a grape you simply don't find being used to make wine outside of Israel and maybe other Middle Eastern countries that may make wine. I don't know if there are any, but it is very Israeli. And he said because of this grape, the whiskey doesn't come across as winey. And there's so much to learn. And so maybe I'll take you up on the idea of interviewing Surendra and see if he has his thoughts on it. And I'll pick his brain as well. You be the curious child on your side, and I'll be the curious child over here.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's really interesting. Yeah, you are already a curious child, Joshua, I must say.
I'm definitely a child.
And you're
that's for
just
sure.
like the curious case of Benjamin Button. I think it's a curious case of Joshua Hatton over here, right? You're just growing younger the day.
Oh yeah, what did you say about my? I love this. You saw my Keeper of the Quake picture, and you said, "Who's that grumpy fat guy?"
Yeah, I just said, "Who's this grumpy, grumpy old man who's holding the Quake, and he's the national sales manager of Impex portfolio?" And I'm like, would I be even able to talk to him? Or he's like, "Oh, the snobbish guy who's like, oh, I'll send you the reports. Don't even talk to me."
Yeah.
And I see you, and I'm like, "Ooh, who's this cool guy?" And that was a surprise for me. And the last 2 days. I must say, Joshua, that there's a lot of bonding that's gone over here. I mean, the work is something that we do.
Yeah.
I think the relationship is something that's totally different, and I respect it. And looking forward to drink a lot more single malts and bourbons and ryes and whatnot around the world and learn about them through you.
Yeah, and learn about them with you as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. All right, final question for you. As you look toward the future, now I know you talked about this, you hinted at this distillery in Scotland, but as you look toward the future, the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what has you excited? Whether it's about Indian single malt as a category or about Indri as a brand, what has you excited? What are the potentials?
One, I think Indian single malt over the next 2.5, 3 years will establish even more as a category.
Yeah.
But what I'm excited about Indri's got a lot of potential, right? We're sitting at 40,000 barrels. And we as a distillery are yet to discover what lies inside those 40,000 barrels. Right? What's the kind of liquid in that 40,000 barrels?
Yeah.
What can we play with? What we cannot play with?
Yeah.
The company is constantly investing on new casks, port casks, casks from different parts of the world, so that we could produce something new, right? Peated ones, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot that's going to come out from the distillery. And I'm sure Surendra is already working a lot of things in his mind and is not telling out because he just wants to make sure that it comes out well before he shares it with us. Right?
Yeah.
So I think we as a distillery have a great future, the Piccadilly distilleries, because firstly we have Mr. Siddharth, who's the chairman of the company, the current chairman of the company, has got good vision. Right, he listens to what's happening around him.
Yeah,
he listens to what's happening in the world, right, in the space of this. So he's quite open. So I think with a leader who's quite open to listen, a lot of things can change, or a lot of things can happen. And then we have a very small but passionate team working behind the brand. Every single person I see has got a lot of passion. And I think that's very important for a brand to grow. And I see that passion in the team at Amrut. I have seen that passion in the team at Paul John.
Yeah.
And I find the same passion in the team at Indri as well.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple of guys at Amrut that I have personally known. Surinder, Ashok, there is a guy called Pramod. So these guys, I know that, I've seen from the team. And Mr. Rakshit, who's the current, Mr. Jagdale, who was the father who founded the distillery. It's their son, Rakshit Jagdale. So all these guys are a bunch of passionate guys.
Yeah.
They're passionate about what they do. In the Paul John team, there are a couple of people, right? Mr. Paul John, Michael, there was a gentleman called Himanshu who had the marketing. And a couple of people, we are very passionate about what we did. In Indri, I have a team who has a gentleman called Prabkaran who takes care of the domestic market. There's a guy called Nitin in my team. I'm mentioning these names because they are doing a lot for the brand, which none of us really don't see.
Yeah.
And we have a team of people, right? The warehouse keeper in our distillery. A lot of people who does a lot of things for the brand. So I think there's a bunch of passionate people behind the whole team at each of these distilleries, including Indri. And that's why I believe that it's not a job. It's not a distiller's job, or it is not a distillery manager job. It is it's we owning the liquid at every step. I think that's what I see with all these distilleries in common, and with the Indian single malts. That's pretty much in common. I think we have a road ahead of us.
It's the passion. It's the pride. The pride on the canister. I love it. I love it all. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be part of the team, bringing it into the U.S., sharing it with Americans. It's going to be exciting. So I'm looking forward to growing with you. I'm looking forward to traveling with you more, drinking with you more, and learning with you more.
Right. Beautiful, Josh.
All right.
Thanks so much for this evening.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Listening back to our conversation, and specifically back to us tasting the whiskey together, there was this one note that I loved Madhu talking about, and it reminded me of you. In that, I asked him, is there like a key note that you think of when you talk about Indri whiskeys, whether it's the Trini bottling or if it's some of the single casks, right? What's that one note that always jumps out at you? And he said, damp rugs.
Hey.
And I thought about you because in and of itself...
I have ruined a few rugs in my day, I'll tell you.
Was it rug pissers? It was woo pissed on the rug. Anyway, what I loved about that note is in and of itself, that sounds like a note that no one should just utter.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Line up for my damp rug whiskey.
However, you are famous for using clean urinal or bandages. Now, granted, new fresh
tub.
bandages,
Hospital bandages
and things like that. Yeah. And these are like phrases that, in and of themselves, you say, "Ooh, geez, really?" But they have certain elements to them when combined with everything else going on.
Yeah.
They help to offset other things and can be a pleasant thing, right? And so the damp rug note made me think of growing up after my mom and dad divorced. But here's a theme. Here's the theme of the podcast. My mom and dad got divorced. We'll call back to divorce. Every Sunday my mom would drop me off at my grandparents' house. Especially, it was mostly in the summers, right? I'd stay over Sunday night and into the Monday. But I would stay downstairs. They had this finished old musty basement, which I loved. And underneath the bed that I slept in were these cubbies that had these old, dusty, musty Afghans, hand-knitted Afghans. And you're laughing at me. Oh, my gosh. And not Afghan people, Jason, the warm, yes, okay. My grandparents were not housing dusty Afghan people. They were...
The images being thrown out right now are just layering one on top of the other.
There was something so incredibly comforting about those Afghan blankets. And it's just something, when he said that, it brought me back to my own childhood. And
of course.
Right? And that was what turned me on to whiskey in the very beginning, in 2004 or 5, whatever year it was, when I tasted Lagavulin for the first time, and I was transported back to camping with my dad, and the campfire and the soil and the autumn leaves, and right? And so when he said damp rug, I instantly connected that to, musty Afghans, and I'm transported back yet again. And that's the beauty of a tasting note like that, and the beauty of whiskey in general, because it transports you back in time, right? It's not just something that gets you from point A to point B. It will give you a time capsule.
100%. The question that I've got for you, and I was alluding to this as we went into the interview, and then you tasted in the interview. You and I traditionally have not been fans of malt whiskey in red wine casks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's the occasional Glenmorangie comes along and really pleasantly surprises us.
I agree. Yeah.
Right? Penderyn has had some success there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I alluded to M&H going in, and now here we are with Indri. Why do you think there's success with red wine in this instance?
I really think it's a bit of a balancing act for Surinder to put this together. Kind of like that damp rug note that Madhu talks about. It's only pleasant when it's balanced out by something else, right? When I taste Indri and I think of the red wine, I'm not getting a wininess at all. I'm getting a fruitiness, but I'm not necessarily convinced it is a red wine-driven fruitiness. I almost wonder if the red wine casks give you more access to the French oak, right? Because it's Bordeaux wine. So they're using French oak. I don't know if they're using exclusively Limousin. I don't know how it's pronounced, oak. So I think in part it's more access to that wood, potentially due to the climate. One thing he mentioned was that massive shift in temperatures from winter to summer. You can go from 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter to 122 degrees Fahrenheit or 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. And so when we think of Scotch whiskies that are sometimes matured in red wine casks, quite often it tastes like high-octane red wine. But if you taste the M&H red wine cask, it's different, and it has a similar climate to India. So part of me wonders that. But then if I think back to our conversation with Tomer and Tal, they talk about the Israeli red wine that previously was in that cask, the cask that they use, and the grape in and of itself is a very earthy, vegetal style of wine that isn't really winey. It's more earthy because it's a Mediterranean grape. And so I wonder if for M&H is a combination of the climate and the grape, and if for Indri it's a combination of the climate and a good balancing act between the red wine, between the PX, and between the bourbon.
Yeah, that's good. I like that answer. It's certainly something worth exploring and worth paying attention to as we start putting it across our own palates. Yeah, that's good. That's a good note going on in there. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great interview. Really fascinating learning more about a new distillery. That's why we're here. That's why we do this episode after episode is what can we learn about? What can our listeners learn about with us? Yeah. This has been a good season. Season 6 is ticking along very nicely.
The last thing that I'll say, and we discussed it in the interview, and this was, every once in a while I ask you, what during the conversation surprised you about this person or about that distillery? Now, you weren't part of this conversation, so I couldn't ask you before we went into listening to it. But during the various training sessions we had, he talked about the size of their distillery, the size of their output, which is 12,000 liters per day, and they run 24/7. So they're at about 4.5-ish million liters of spirit per year. And I keep on bringing this up. By comparison, Caol Ila is 7 million liters of spirit per year, but typically run about 4 million liters of spirit. And that's the smoky backbone to the biggest blend, Johnny Walker Black. And so you have this distillery that no one's heard of that's been producing malt whiskey to go into blends for years and years, that's producing just as much liquid as Caol Ila is. And so just think about that from the standpoint of the growth we could be seeing from Indri and the various bottlings that we can be getting from them. It really is exciting for me as someone with Impex, but taking that hat off, it's exciting to me from the perspective of the growth of Indian single malt as a category.
Yeah, you and I talked about it in a not too distant extra, where the SWA, Scotch Whisky Association, seem to have their eyeballs on getting into the Indian market this year, and if not this year, 2023, and just looking at numbers like a 10% increase in access to the Indian market would result in this exponential financial reward. And so the sheer number of bottles of whiskey that are being sold in India within its home market is mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling.
Yep.
And so for us to be encountering a distillery that we've never heard of that runs that type of capacity makes perfect sense from within its home market. But for them to be getting into export, like Amra, like Paul John, it's excellent. And to see a rising category is really cool as well. And you and I have, we've been championing American single malt whiskey in recent weeks and months, but we've also championed world whiskey.
Yes.
And really excited to see individual markets grow within world whiskey as well. So yeah, I'm excited. As always, when we get out and we get these interviews conducted and we learn about new things, it's always exciting.
I know that we have no news to discuss. We've shared all the news that was fit to print in our last episode about the whiskeys that had come in. Oh, you do have something.
It's absolute. I know you'll ask the question. It's absolutely not worth waking up the paper boy. I'll just pop it right here for our American-based listeners.
Okay.
We received an email to the info account. Somebody had been looking to make their first order. And we've spoken so much and for so long on this podcast /padcast about our $10 flat rate shipping fee.
Yes.
That when they went to place their order and it was a $15 flat rate shipping fee, they wondered what was going on. And so to lay it down in the podcast, as of August 1 of 2022, Single Cask Nation online in the United States moved to a $15 flat rate shipping fee to absorb some of the additional costs that we've been seeing from our UPS shipper across the United States. It was 7 good years.
Yeah. I really liked how you said to absorb some of the cost, right?
Some.
Yeah, we've been really proud of $10 flat rate for the past 7 years, and in some cases, it's been incredibly beneficial. Like right now, we have 5 different bottlings on our website, so people could have bought, 5 of each, get 25 bottles, $10 flat shipping. Now it's $15, right? So. What's that?
I think our shipper will have a heart attack if we see an order for 25 bottles come in. How does one ship 25 bottles? Answer, carefully.
Yeah.
So there you go. So I wanted to put a marker because I know there are people catching up and some people are completionists and started with episode 1. And so they've been maybe hearing $10 for the length of our history here. Yeah. And so now we've put a marker in the sand, 15.
And here's where we start tracking the girth of our podcast, right? Before it was the length, now we're, right? Am I doing this right?
That's it. It goes, all I know is it goes all the way around. That's all I know. So there you go. I wanted to drop that. And then just one more thing along those lines is the price of whiskey is increasing. Like you and I talk about this all the time. We buy from stores, we buy online, we buy from plenty of producers who are not us. We're seeing prices increasing continually. And as we go into OND, I'm sure we're going to see prices increase for October, November, December, the traditional buying months. We continue to fight tooth and nail for pricing that reflects what we were doing 10 years ago. And we're not always able to pull that off because it's a big, big ask. But that's our goal. That sticks with us. And just like we were able to hold on to the $10 flat rate shipping fee for as long as we did, we're still trying to hold on in some places to our more traditional pricing. But there are times when we get good casks at different pricing and we still think it holds value.
Yeah.
We haven't we haven't put out anything that we thought was a ripoff or that we wouldn't buy.
Well, it gets back to, is this something we would open our wallets for? And neither of us are wealthy people, right? So does it taste good? And would we be willing to open up our own wallets? And there you go. So if we're done with this, we don't need the Paperboy news, but here's 10 minutes of news. Then
that was 5 minutes. It was a tight 5.
I thought it would be smart for you and I to do another blind barrels tasting, because we got 4 samples and we've been through 2 of them. You blind tasted me on one, and then I blind tasted you on one, or was it vice versa? Did I blind taste you and then you blind tasted me? How does that work?
Both blind tasted at the same time.
Oh, we blind tasted together. All right, let's do that. So let's pick one.
So we have tasted sample A and we have tasted sample C. And so if I'm correct, that leaves us B and D. Joshua, I'm going to shuffle these 2 envelopes in my hand.
Okay.
The one in my left hand is number 1. The one in my right hand is number 2. Do you want?
You have number
1
2
or
in your
2?
hand?
Easy. It's the Madonna.
You know what? I'm going to go with number 2.
You have picked letter B, the second
B.
letter of the alphabet. So we have
right.
D for the last time out.
D for the last time. Okay, so we're not opening that yet.
Put sample B letter to the side.
That is to the side. We are breaking out our samples. So this is B, you said? Okay, so, all right.
I like how you asked me that question while I was away from the microphone. Oh, this looks like the darkest to date. Which
it does.
Jess loves it when we talk color on the podcast. Look how dark this one is, Jess. Look at this one. Look at the color on this, Jess.
I just love that the one person who is colorblind likes to talk about the color on the liquid.
A was the lightest.
Yeah.
C was a hair darker than A, and now B is darker than both.
Okay. And so A was the Hakushu 12. C was the SCN Ben Nevis 6. And now B. So again,
And if this,
yeah.
any listeners who are listening to us do these blind tastings for the very first time, we of course got both of them correct. Anybody who has listened to those tastings, just play along, just quietly play along. Allow us a little bit of indulgence.
So just really quickly, Blind Barrels, they are, by the way, they are not a paid advertiser. We don't have any paid advertisement here. But they're friends of the podcast.
That's why we're not rich men, Joshua.
Oh, God damn it. See,
That's
if
why
we
we're
did
not
that.
rich men.
Anyway.
Oh, we'd be on easy street.
So Seabass, who we've mentioned on the podcast many a time, is with Blind Barrels, and they're a company. You can order blind samples from their website. They'll ship them to you, and you get to discover them just through nose, taste, and color. And then the reveal is afterwards. And so anyway, Seabass, as the company was launching, sent us our own sample packs, but these are samples from his own collection, not from Blind Barrels, because he didn't want us to potentially give away anything that Blind Barrels was officially doing.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So
And you should be able to find them at blindbarrels.com.
So this is interesting. Have you been nosing while I've been yammering?
I've been thoroughly enjoying the nose on this while you've been yammering.
All right. So what have you been getting on the nose?
This nose is so good, I've only heard every third word you've uttered.
Oh, wow. That's my everyday.
I knew the places to interject. Well, actually, before we get to nose notes, I do want to talk about the texture.
Okay.
Because the legs on the glass are spectacular.
Yep.
Absolutely spectacular. So we're dealing with something very, very viscous.
Have you gauged the color? Do you want to give it a moniker?
I would go with a dark orange dipping into burnished copper.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna go with clover honey.
Ooh, also good.
Yeah.
Yes, also
Yep.
good.
Yep. So nice deep golden color.
Yeah.
The nose. Yeah.
Definitely texture on the nose.
So you're getting good nasal texture.
I am indeed.
There's a bright.
There's a presence.
There's a but there a presence and a delicate prickliness on the nose, which makes me think either higher alcohol or maybe there's something going on. Like initially, when I smell this does not smell like malt whiskey, and so I'm thinking, I wonder if there may be a grain-driven, a mash bill-driven brightness on the nose.
Bubbles are suggesting 56 or 58 to me.
Oh, man. How do you do this stupid bubble thing again? I don't know how any of that works.
It's more art than science, and I think was it in the A? Did I get it very wrong? There's one of them. Actually, I think it was our own Ben Nevis.
Oh,
I don't think held the bubbles. Well, you're never going to look at bubbles and think 67.6. Bubbles are never going to tell you that story. But I think at its age, I think it maybe ran away quite quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not getting the prickle that you're talking about, but I am getting a warmth from it, like this enveloping warmth to go along with this nasal texture.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's changed my initial smell. I'm thinking, okay, this almost smells like an American whiskey. Like it didn't smell like malt to me. Like maybe not American, but it smelled like a mixed mash bill whiskey, not single malt.
So you took the very question out of my mouth, which was, given what you were saying earlier in today's episode about being at Cadenhead's, nosing the blind Paul John and saying, this is an Indian whiskey, and knowing that it wasn't Scottish single malt.
Yeah.
It was a region outside of that, and then Indian beyond that. In putting my nose in here, I'm thinking, okay, is this the aroma of Scotch? Is this the aroma of single malt? Is this American single malt? Like I'm a little bit beggared, as they say, on the region of this.
All right. I asked Tickety Boo, and you couldn't tell me what that is. What's beggared?
I don't know. It comes from the expression to beggar belief. Like, oh, that beggars belief. Like, beggar is different from those who would beg for money. But, yeah, beggar's belief.
I've never heard beggar's belief. I've heard, it begs the question, but I've never heard beggar's
Which is
belief.
a very different, that's a much more precise philosophical term than it's come to be used. If you get me on to beg the question, I really could talk for 30 minutes. So let's get back to let's get back to that question of regionality, because I think it's an interesting one.
So first off, back to the nose. I'm getting a lot of licorice going on here. I wouldn't call it all sorts, but just straight up black salted licorice going on.
Yes, see, for me, there was the warmth of it extended to brown licorice, all sorts. It's funny, they were always the ones I left in the bag growing up. And now as I go through whiskeys, I'm like, oh, that's brown licorice all sorts. Oh, that's brown licorice all sorts. And it's all things that I love.
Those are the ones that I loved because it had the coconut going on along with that sort of hard, sugary fondant, you know.
Do you think this is American?
The more I nose it, the more unidimensional it becomes. Isn't that the same for you?
The things that it does well, but it's not doing a laundry list of things.
Yeah, at first nosing, it said, I'm American whiskey. And now it's saying, I'm whiskey. You know, and not necessarily giving me the clues. So I'm watching you nose this, and I currently have my hand over my glass just to sort of reconcentrate the alcohol that's been evaporating.
Emphasis on glass. Hand over his glass. I'm tasting it.
Oh, you're going in? All right.
I have to. This is one of those moments where I think tasting it will then develop the nose.
Okay, so while you taste that, just so people are aware, and this is a reminder for people, this is how Jason and I typically taste, is we will take the first sip and ignore the flavors completely. We're gauging texture to see what that's doing. And then the second sip is we're gonna talk about flavor. So go.
Go ahead and taste this.
Yeah, okay.
Go and taste it, yeah.
Oh, the nose, though, really quickly, back to the nose, I'm getting this dusty, musty kind of bourbon-y quality going on.
Yep, I've got some more orange finding its way in here, almost
okay.
dark chocolate with orange peels.
Okay, so that really, it tastes like a bourbon to me. It tastes like a younger bourbon. If you were to tell me this was maybe like a Kentucky Spirit, like a Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit, I would believe you. There's a slight nuttiness going on in there.
It's nice on the palate. It's a very pleasing sipper. I think the alcohol becomes a little more drying on the palate, a little drying to the sides of the tongue, inside of the cheeks. It definitely did add a component to the nose for me, which was nice.
Yeah, so
that orange that I mentioned a moment ago came after tasting it.
Oh, there you go.
As it's drying, it's okay, let's return to another sip of this. It completes the circle. I like that. That goes down easy. Oh,
and going back to the nose, now I'm getting lemongrass. I'm getting orange, juji fruit, sweetness to it. Slight herbaceousness going on, and that nuttiness.
Slight herbaceousness, agreed.
Right?
Yep, agreed.
Delicate nuttiness.
So the only one we have to protect our glass on, I'm putting my hands over my own glass here, is if this is SCN Wild Turkey or this is SCN Light Whiskey. That would be the only way we can embarrass ourselves here if we can't name our own product.
So I am going to go out on what I feel is not a very long limb. I feel as if...
I've heard that about you.
This limb is a good size.
Yeah, what's the girth on that?
I just know it goes all the way around.
Exactly.
This is not light whiskey. This is not light whiskey. I'm not getting.
I love it when you make the declaratives. It makes me so happy. Oh, you're making me so happy right now, Joshua.
And I don't necessarily believe this to be an SCN Wild Turkey, only because.
Yes.
It's a bit too easy.
I love it when you commit the words. I love it. I know you could potentially take all of this in post, but
no, I won't. I'm happy to embarrass myself.
No, I agree with you. I feel like there have been turkey casks that we've sampled at the distillery for potential selection that have done exactly what this does, which is you say, that's well-produced whiskey that is very drinkable. And even more than that, not even whiskey. This is well-produced bourbon that is very drinkable. But I know you and I go back and forth on darker spices. in our wild turkey selections. Sometimes the older turkey funk, sometimes an herbaceousness. We did see a wee bit of herbaceousness in here.
Now,
I don't think this is one of our SCN turkeys. If this turns out to be a Whiskey Jubilee turkey, however.
so this whole time we've only been talking about turkey. It could be another producer now. My own palate's understanding of what Buffalo Trace tends to put out, what Heaven Hill tends to put out, this doesn't seem to fit that profile from the various bottlings that they do. The only one that's potentially tripping me up, is it could be McKenna, because it is softer on the palate, and McKenna has always been kind of soft for me, 50% alcohol.
There's no doubt.
Here's the thing with McKenna, though. That whiskey has never just sat with me. I've always kind of just found it to be too simple. And I don't think that this whiskey is simple enough to be McKenna. I think there's a bit too much going on. And so the reason why I say I'm questioning it is once I discovered I didn't particularly love McKenna for my palate, I just stopped buying it. So I think the last McKenna bottling I got will have been in 2013 or something like that, right? So it's been a while.
I've always liked McKenna. That was always one that I would pick up going into Kentucky. And
yeah, which is why I've always questioned your palate,
It's been a good run. What are the chances? And I'm going to go back. Listen, I've made no secret about it. My bourbon palate is incredibly limited. I don't know, really individual differences.
Yeah.
I do know turkey though from being, in those warehouses and hanging out with Eddie and Bruce and having a great time over there. What are the chances of this being a wild turkey rare breed?
I don't think that there's a good chance of that at all. I don't think there's enough alcohol here to bring it to that level. Rare breed's always bigger. But I did have a fleeting thought here. Because of the color, I'm thinking young. Because of the overall flavor development, I'm thinking younger. I wonder if this may be a new riff, which I really like, in part because, back to, we use this example all the time, back to Kilhoman, where you get to, follow them along and watch them evolve. I feel as if I've been doing that with New Riff, getting new bottlings here and there to watch how they progress, and it's been great, and I've loved what they've been doing. So I wonder if this is maybe a New Riff. Have you had enough New Riff? I mean, you have the two Rare Bird 101 bottlings, but I don't know if you've had New Riff beyond those two bottlings.
I haven't. I have not. And I know that Bill Thomas at Jack Rose is really into them as well. And I think I've actually got a Jack Rose New Riff as well. Okay. And I got one for you.
Oh, you got one for me? Nice. All right, is it the reveal?
I gave it to you years ago. Yeah, don't pretend it's in my house. It's in yours.
Oh.
I got no space in my house for anything else.
All right, so are you opening it and I'm not opening it?
Yeah. Let me go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Because you've at least made guesses, whereas I'm pretty convinced this is bourbon.
Yes, as am I. I don't think it can be.
I would like for it to come from our friends at Wild Turkey, but let's see if you're accurate with your New Riff guess. I would even give you credit for your earlier
Kentucky Spirit.
What was it you said? Kentucky Spirit. So yeah. I would even give you credit for that. So
all right,
let's have a little look.
I tell you, I like it. Whatever it is, I do like it. It's a bit simple, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's the best of answers because you are both right and wrong, which always makes me happy.
Okay, so start. Give us a little bit.
Don't tell me where to start. Don't tell me where to start. Okay, let's ABV. I said 56 to 58. It's 54.5.
Okay, so there you go.
The mash bill is.
What
as soon as I tell you,
does
it's-
that do for ABV?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that do for proof? Because it's a bourbon, we got to put it into proof terms.
So imagine it was 55, it would be 110 and then take off one. So it's 109.
109, 54.5. Okay.
So 109 proof for your bourbon people.
Can't believe I asked for
Aged-
proof. Jesus Christ. All right, go
I
ahead.
know. I didn't expect that to be a question. The age statement is a minimum of 9 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Minimum of 9 years. 109 proof, 54.5%. So it's not a Russell's Reserve, because that's always 55%. Oh, wait. Wait. Isn't the rye 54.5?
We got the distillery right, or I did, and you did it. You got the distillery right earlier.
Yeah.
We got the style wrong.
So this is Wild Turkey Rye. Wow. Look at that.
This is Master's Keep Cornerstone Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey Batch 0001. And the mash bill is presumed, it's not available, it's presumed to be 51% rye, 37% corn, and 12% barley.
Right. So I think that explains why it doesn't come off very rye-like. But okay, I have something I want to say before I say that.
Please say it.
No.
Please say whatever you need to say. I'm going to pour more.
I want to hear some tasting notes. I want to see if any of the tasting notes we had aligned with what's written on the sheet.
Okay, and then you're going to remember what you were going to say.
Oh
after.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The aroma: spicy graham cracker,
All right.
licorice,
There we go.
medicinal cherry, ginger, Nilla wafers. Is that how you pronounce that?
Nilla, yeah. As in
Okay,
vanilla.
got it right. Yeah. Seasoned oak, candied lemon peel, green apple. So they weren't getting any of the orange. I definitely got the orange peels in dark chocolate going on for me. Tasting notes: cinnamon stick. So they've got both spicy graham cracker on the nose and cinnamon stick on the palate.
Okay.
They've got a real spice going on there.
yeah.
That I don't. You said a little prickle on the nose to begin with, but then that dissipated.
It did dissipate, but 54.5. All right.
So cinnamon stick, black tea dryness.
Oh, there you go. You did talk about
the
that.
drying on the palate there. Black pepper, clove, brandied cherry. So that's following on from the medicinal cherry in the aroma. Brandied cherry and oak sap. And then the finish for them: leather, ancho chili, rye spice, and clove.
So I know maple tree has sap. I've never heard of oak sap before.
Oak sap. There you go.
Unless they're talking
So
about
let
a
me-
sap made from oak, like a sap that the police would use and hit you over the head with.
Sounds like a trademark. Their take. This is the Blind Barrel's take. Who are the only independent bottlers of Wild Turkey products? That's right. They're the ones reading this. I recall Jason drinking the Wild Turkey 81 proof rye in an earlier One Nation Under Whiskey episode, and I just knew you had to try the pinnacle of Wild Turkey rye whiskey. And he spells whiskey with an E and then says, sorry, that's how it's on their label. We accept that.
Fair.
And then Seabass himself writes, I savor every drop of this. And so sharing that, giving us the chance to do the blind tasting on that. I love that there's a distillery thread there.
Yes.
Even though we got the style wrong, I love the fact that this tasted like turkey.
It did taste like turkey.
I think that's...
Yep. We were both there.
Now, to a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And to somebody with Jason's knowledge of bourbon, every answer is wild turkey. It's like the old Trivial Pursuit game, the golf question. If you knew nothing about golf, the answer was either Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicklaus.
Yeah.
Like just use those two for any golf question, and you would invariably, be more right than wrong. So wild turkey is my answer, and I stand by it.
Yeah, well, it did taste like turkey to me, which is interesting, right? Because the mash bill was different, but it just kind of really screamed turkey. So it's interesting.
Except for when it screamed New Riff.
Well, that's just because I like casting doubt. Like I want to cover the bases, but it's interesting. It makes me wonder: is that turkey thread not necessarily so grain driven as it might be still driven, yeast driven, fermentation driven, maturation driven, right? Because the thread was there. Like we both felt somewhat confident that it was wild turkey, and it ended up being wild turkey. But so this is what I was going to say before. I bought the Cornerstone when it came out, and anytime I pour Cornerstone for myself, like Seabass, I savor every drop of it. But my experience of it, pouring it from the Cornerstone bottle versus pouring it from a sample bottle, totally different. I almost felt as if it was better out of the Cornerstone bottle than it was out of the sample bottle, and it just goes to show you how the brain works. It puts more importance on something when it knows specifically what it is. And I'm thinking, and I've told this story to you, I've told this story to our listeners before. When we moved into the house that I'm in now, the week before, I was doing a bottle emptying party, and John Kaz was there, and my buddy Johnny Van was there, and a bunch of other people. And there was this dude, Joe, there, who is a self-proclaimed bourbon fanatic. And so what I did is I had an older bottle, like the old dumpy 10-year-old old Rip Van Winkle bottlings. And I put that in a paper bag. Along with some other ones, right?
I took it to the sidewalk.
And I
sat on the curb and I drank it all down. Sweet, sweet medicine.
And that whiskey was the least favorite.
Wow, yeah.
But if people had known what it was, it would have been the favorite. And so I'm not saying that this wild turkey is a lesser whiskey. I'm saying...
No, it's delicious. It's delicious.
Right? I said I love it, whatever it is. I think it's very good. But my point is, it's amazing what your brain does when it realizes it has to put things into specific categories.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look at the conversation you and I have had previously about pouring Lagavulin 16 from the smoky bottle and pouring it from a clear sample bottle or a decanted clear bottle.
Yep.
It's a different whiskey.
Yep.
It's a different whiskey outside of that smoky bottle. It's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And psychologically, that's what I love about our blind sampling portion is it's a total head fuck.
Yeah.
And it's such a good exercise, and to give credit where it's due, we kind of stole the idea from Steve Hawley when he was still with Westland about the weekly blind tastings they would do at the distillery, and how it was a great opportunity to kind of stretch the muscle, right? The tongue muscle, if it is a muscle. I'm still just savoring this on my tongue. This is so good, and I have poured a second one of it. Really delicious. Thanks to Seabass and thanks to Blind Barrels for sending this along, and check them out, blindbarrels.com.
A bit of mail that came in. There's actually a piece that I think is one of the most important pieces of mail to come in some time.
It must say something complimentary about Joshua Hahn.
Go, is he? Jeez. And I'll tell you, we have got a load of emails to read, but this one I think is important, Jason. And so this one is from listener / nation member Dan Greisen, right, who we've mentioned before. He's
good. Yep, good lad.
Yep, he's currently in Scotland. He's at the Springbank School, which he may be done with that by now. But anyway, the subject simply titled "A Question to Ponder." ... And so it starts off. He says, "Hello, Joshua and Jason." Then he says, "First, you need to know that my selected order of salutation was deliberate. Allow me to explain."
Oh, my Lord. Oh, we have problems. Mm-hmm. We have such problems. All right.
"While I do enjoy both of you equally, several episodes ago, Jason insulted both myself and, more importantly, my daughters when he stated people of lesser intelligence enjoy the horror genre."
This has taken much longer for the pigeons to come home to roost than I thought it would. Can't believe we've made it to the episode at the end of August and it's getting called out.
He's been sitting on this one. It's just been...
Spoiler alert, I regret nothing. So please continue.
Oh, that's going to spur a second email from him. Let me continue. He says, "Might I add, that is quite the declarative statement, Jason, something you often abuse poor Joshua for using."
Poor Joshua, listen to this.
That's right.
Oh,
Dan is coming to not just my defense, but to his defense, and he's defending his daughter as a father, Jason.
Wow.
Let me continue.
Wow.
Now I may not be the smartest man in the room.
Counterpoint.
But to say that about my daughters, well, I need to draw a line there and defend them. Across this line, you do not, and by the way, please, dude, Asian American. Sometimes people with above average intelligence do enjoy turning the brain off and just getting lost in the fun.
Oh, said no intelligent person ever.
Said no modern Star Wars fan ever. Anyway.
Oh, multiple callbacks. This has been a good episode. This is very pro level.
All right. This is. He hasn't even gotten to the reason for his podcast.
I know. We're still going. Keep going.
I almost said he hasn't gotten to the reason for his podcast. I meant his email. Not everything...
Should we save all our riffing for the second half?
Not everything needs to be a think tank. My daughters and I have created quite a fun tradition of Friday night horror movie nights. As my kids are close in age to yours, I know you can appreciate how important those things found to spend time with them are.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
He is not wrong.
Time with Dad isn't always a priority. That stings. That's terrible. Yeah.
It's exactly how we started today's episode with the video game doc on Netflix.
There you go.
Watching it with the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old.
Oh, and here you go. This is he's gonna call to. And by the way, this email came in on this most recent Sunday, so whatever that is, it's August 19th now. Do the math. Anyway. If I can pile on, I'm currently on a bus from Glasgow to Campbelltown listening to your latest episode, and once again, you are railing on horror movies. FYI, Joshua, I too am a Clive Barker fan, having read most of his books. Now, to wrap this rant up, please know I am saying all of this in jest. Love you both and remain a loyal fan of SCN, the Padcast, and more importantly, both of you. Going forward,
Cheers,
all messages will address you as J&J, but having said what you just said, Jason, he may retract that kind offer.
Yeah, there's at least another Joshua and Jason salutation in him. I can tell.
I'm waiting for the email to say Jason and Joshua. I know I may piss him off at one point too. I'm not a perfect man, Jason. Anyway, so he says, now to the main point of this email. Many episodes ago, that was the 17 minutes. Here we go. Many episodes ago.
I'm guessing the guys with the 2-hour plus podcast should not say anything about multi-page emails. Right?
Come on, dear.
Now that I've completed my intro, let me get to the interview portion of my email.
Many episodes ago, while discussing/describing a whiskey, you both continued to use the word soft, which I think we may have used just now. I think it's a word that we go back to on occasion. Now that got me wondering, why is soft okay, but smooth is not? Let me continue here. They're both ultimately descriptors of texture. So why is one okay and the other is not? I will add, I too feel just as you. I do not like the use of smooth, but freely throw around soft. I have my reasons why, but rather than lead the witness, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thanks as always, Dan. Cheers. No, thanks as always. Cheers,
That's
Dan.
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Always a top shelf email from one of my favorite listeners and nation members.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Solid guy.
Was that enough to get me my name?
I don't think so.
First in
I
billing?
don't think so at all. I think you got reparations, Jason. So I have my very specific reason why I use soft.
Yeah, go on. Keep going.
Okay. I don't use soft as, well, if I do use it in this manner, I don't mean to. But when I use the descriptor of soft, it's not something that signifies texture. Rather, for me, it signifies how the whiskey itself holds its own alcohol and the degree at which the flavors/scents are delivered to your palate or your nose. So if those scents or those flavors are jumping out at you, that's not soft. You can still have a really good oily texture and a good nasal texture, but if the scents are like, and flavors are just like, pay attention to me, that's not a soft whiskey. A soft whiskey is like, no, you come to me a little bit, right? I'm still going to have that nice texture of the other whiskeys, but I'm going to deliver these scents and these flavors in a way that's just a bit gentler. So it's not a texture, but it's a delivery system of those scents and of those flavors. That's how I typically like to use it.
Yeah, I'm sure people with better knowledge of the podcast than me could correct me on this, but I don't know if soft is a term I use particularly much.
You do use soft.
I do use soft. So
and it could very well be because I use soft. Like you and I know when we do tastings, sometimes we'll start using the words that the other person uses, not even realizing it. And so I know that you do use it.
And so I agree with you. If it wasn't going to be heard negatively, I think you could sub in the word muted, right? But
see,
not,
could...
but not negatively, right?
Yeah, that's the tough bit. Yep.
For me, it could be the difference between hearing music in the room you're sitting in and hearing music through the wall, right?
Okay.
Right, coming in from your kid, right?
Yeah.
You're still picking up the notes, but it's just a little muted. There's something between you and it. And so I think that soft is the speaking of a dialing down. Instead of the dial being at 11, the dial's at 4 or 5, right? So it's still present, but it's easy.
All right. Well, let me ask.
Mellow.
Let me ask you a slightly deeper question. would there be a time where you would prefer the use of soft over muted because muted can have a pejorative sense to it?
Oh, I think it would always be preferred over muted.
Yeah.
Always. I'm just saying I think the term soft can be considered a stand-in for muted, but we never say muted because it only gets heard negatively.
Yep.
Whereas soft, well, beds are soft and pillows are soft and middle-aged dad tummies are soft.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were going to say flaccid penises, but that's different.
Always the middle-aged dad penis with you. And so I would go even a little further, and I've been asking myself this question and listening to the question from Dan and listening to your answer. I could potentially use it as a texture descriptor. I think soft can speak to it treading lightly across the palate, right? It's just a little forest nymph delivering floral petals, right? As it tiptoes across your tongue.
Okay, so right, but when you talk about floral, when you are you more using it for regionality? Like, could you use that for a Laphroaig, right? Could you use that for?
Yeah, no.
Right? So I think I see what
Unless
you're saying.
Unless it was Laphroaig Select. Laphroaig Select might be soft. I know. We do.
Do we have to read? We have to read the other one really quickly. This is very important. So
I think this has been one of the most talked about emails we've ever had on the podcast.
So I think your point is a good one. However, I would argue that to use soft in the way in which you've just mentioned, you typically have to have the modifier of regionality being tied to that.
I would send any listener of this episode back to last week's Extra, where we spent some time feeling out floral and regionality within the lowlands.
Yeah.
And I think if you were to talk about soft, you could, and you're talking regionality just now, I think you could attach it to the traditional profile of the lowlands.
Yeah.
Right? I think you could get away with it in there. But you have an apropos update for us here, so please.
So this email came in from Kevin Dunlop, which if memory serves, he is the Scottish expat living somewhere in Illinois. Something like that.
Does he commute to Milwaukee?
Yeah, from Ayr. He commutes from Ayr to Milwaukee every day, 5 days a week.
Bless him.
So,
that's why he can get in one of our episodes a week.
Right? It's the only way that makes his commute worthwhile, tolerable. Anyway, so the subject is simply called The Select.
Ta-da!
And so it says, Kevin, you failed us already in this. This is
yes, boom, we're off to a winner.
Yeah, right. He says, "Dear Jason and Joshua, very clear difference. Two Illinois boys here. One of them says Joshua and Jason. The other one is a clear racist." And puts the Scotsman before the American. I see what's happening here. So I say that.
Is Scottish a race?
I don't know. Is Scottish a race? I think you're just really white.
I think it's an ethnicity.
It is an ethnicity. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, with an ethnicist. Anyway, so he says, "Dear Jason and Joshua, I listened to your podcast with the Laphroaig Select story. That night, I went to see the Scottish band Skerryvore, Skerryvore, which I think in Scots Gaelic is pronounced MHBTLZZMH.
Yeah. It's pronounced variable in Gaelic.
So he saw the Scottish band Skerryvore at a little venue in Wisconsin. So there you go. There's your Wisconsin connection. He says, I was the DD for the band. And that's not Dunkin' Donuts. That's designated driver. which was unusual to not share a dram with them. Also unusual to meet fellow Livingstoners anywhere. Anywho, it was the owner of the venue's birthday. The band and him have a lot of history helping them tour the U.S., so they brought him a little bottle of, yes, you guessed it, Laphroaig Select.
And his wife looked at it, rolled her eyes, and put it off to the side. They never opened it.
He continues, I figure if it's good enough for the lads of Scaryvore to gift, it must be good enough. And then he says, I've attached a picture of said bottle now displayed behind the bar for your viewing pleasure. And so there it is. And so it says, Happy birthday, JJ, Scaryvore. And then it has all of their autographs on there. So there you go. It sounds
That's
like
awesome.
a proper gift, and a proper gift by four Scotsmen to a barkeep there.
So there you go, Sean. Have your sister's boyfriend stick that in his pipe and smoke it.
Last bit here. We got an email from Sean on the same day Kevin sent that email. And it said, and it's just a follow-up to the I bought the wrong bottle for the right reasons. It says, hey, Josh and Jason. So he got the order right. I'll take Josh. That's all right. I listened
Said Joshua never.
I listened to the most of the most recent podcast yesterday, right? Because you talked about completionist. Sean says he's doing it in order.
Indeed.
Right? It's foreplay first and then, right? So anyway, he says...
How mathematicians have sex. They do it in order. It's a math joke. Just move on. The mathematicians out there are loving it.
In Scotland, do they call them the mathematicians?
No.
Or the arithmeticists? Anyway.
We call them the aristocrats.
So he says, so I listened to most of the most recent podcast yesterday and really appreciate the time you took to answer my question and various directions that you took it. To speak to a few of your comments, I am 46 and live in North Carolina, originally from Massachusetts.
Okay.
My sister and her boyfriend's whiskey of choice is usually Jack Daniel's or J.D. Honey, right? We were curious about what they normally drink. And mostly they make cocktails. Okay, so we got a good lay of the land.
There we go. Good.
Hearing that, I'm still going to stand by the point that I think Laphroaig Select is a decent little whiskey to gift. Anyway, I'm going to continue because we're saving the riffing till the end. They do like to drink various spirits, are pretty open to new things, and we shared a few drams in the past. I was hoping to open up their world a little. Her boyfriend is of Scottish heritage, and he is rather focused on this Scottish heritage. They go to the Highland Games in Vermont every year, which I'm familiar with. Third on the list of why I choose that bottle, and the kicker, in my opinion, is they had planned a trip to Scotland for an extended tour, which will include a few distilleries and a few days on Islay, and then this is parenthetical.
There you go.
He says, and will actually leave in the next week or so. So they actually may be on Islay right now. He says, this was part of my thought process. Give them a little taste of what to expect. That, I think, is very cool. Anyway.
100%.
Sean ends it with one last paragraph. He says, you guys are fantastic, and I appreciate that you gave my question its due diligence. Jason, for you, that's due diligence?
I'm only hearing double D. He's the DD.
Yeah. Also, I'm very happy to have given Jason a few nervous moments, but apologize for initially sending my email to the wrong address. Though in hindsight, glad I did because I laughed a little more as a result. Sean. There you go.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
It's a brave move to give Jack Daniel's drinkers Laphroaig, but what a smart move on You're going to be in Scotland. You're going to be on Islay. Like, here's what you're going to be tasting when you go to that Hebridean island.
Yeah.
It just makes it an even kinder gift in my eyes. Yeah, well done, Sean. You're a mensch.
Wow, look at you saying it's a kind gift.
It's a very kind gift. I said that originally.
I don't know if you did. Anyway.
Yeah, horror fans didn't pick up everything I was putting down, but other listeners know what I was saying.
Listen, if you want to be like Kevin or Sean or Dan, you can email us questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. That's whiskey without an E. You can also email us info@singlecastnation.com. And I want to, one last thing, because this comment came in July 13th, and it's from one of our most avid podcast listeners, Padcast listeners, and a devotee of Single Cast Nation, and someone who's connected to our dear friend Ari White. They put together a festival called Kiddish Fest, which happens in New York, and so he sent this little comment on our Apple podcast. So if you want to do a little Apple podcast review, you could do what Ari Cohen did, and I only know it's Ari because his handle is Spirits and Q, as in Spirits and Barbecue. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and so the subject is pad cost to end all pad costs. Oh, no, sorry, padcasts to end all padcasts. I don't know, that's interesting. So 5 stars. And he says, what can one say about this particular padcast related to the I'm not doing good with the English language, Jason, here. What can one say about this particular padcast related to the going on within the whiskey world and the worlds of Joshua and Jason of Single Cast Nation? Their particular brand of humor and easygoing interview style makes it seem like you are always in on the joke and that you are an insider to the whiskey world they are a part of. Their weekly podcasts, or should that be padcast, are a must-listen for me and many other whiskey drinkers. Here's to the 2 chins. There you go. There you go. So.
Wonderful. I love that. I love the reviews helping people discover and the in-jokes within the in-jokes within the reviews. Can you imagine coming as someone who's never heard an episode and they're like, the padcast and the padcast? What the hell is wrong with this person? And why are there multiple people saying this? What type of person listens? Oh, wait till people start talking about horror reviews in our podcast reviews.
Jason, you and I need to watch a horror movie together. I think that's it.
So I don't know if I said this previously. I grew up reading Stephen King. I grew up reading Clive Barker, right? It had a good place. And I'm glad to hear Dan's daughters are right in that same age that I was. It just never transferred to the screen for me. I just much
visually it was too much.
The books.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think visually it seemed more cheesy. Like in the books, it seemed more real.
Oh.
And in the movie, it seemed just more gratuitous.
There's no doubt about it. You know, those earlier Stephen King adaptations, and more importantly, or more specifically, the earlier Clive Barker movie adaptations, like Hellraiser, which was from the Hellbound Heart, novella, was amazing. The film adaptation, I think, had some cool visual aspects to it, but overall was a terrible friggin' movie. Like, it was remarkably cheesy. Yep. But I do wonder if that is a 2000s take on an 80s movie where, that was all the style of it. It was all gratuitous. Yeah.
Let's put a pin in this and get out of here.
All right. Yeah, I like that. So, Jason, thanks as always to you. Sincere thanks to Madhu, who came out to the U.S. for nearly 3 weeks, something like that, just an obscene amount of time in the U.S., as a husband and a father. Thanks to Madhu, Kanna. Thanks to Sean Parent, to Kevin Dunlop, to Dan Greisen, to our listeners, and to Seabass and Blind Barrels again for these samples and getting to taste Wild Turkey Cornerstone out of context was super fun.
Yeah.
I am proud of you and me, Jason, of being able to identify somewhat confidently a Wild Turkey whiskey, though we couldn't tell that it was a rye and not a bourbon, but that's another story. All right. That's it, Jason.
2 chins.
2 chins.